We're going to have to wait a little bit longer for the decision, of course, on whether or not the coalition wants to move the embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. But it seems increasingly likely there'll be some sort of change in policy. So what does all of this mean? How would it actually help the Middle East peace process? Joining me now live is Tzvi Fleischer from the Australia-Israel Jewish Affairs Council. Thanks very much for your time today. Reports today there could be a bit of a halfway decision, that the coalition could agree to move the embassy, but not yet, to do that down the track. Would you consider that a win?
I certainly would. I think the main thing to do is to recognize that Jerusalem is Israel's capital. It has been since 1950, and to correct the sort of very anomalous situation where Israel is the only country in the world we don't let choose its own capital and its own sovereign territory. And moving the embassy needs to be done at some stage, but at least the recognition, some sort of recognition, would be a major step forward.
I mean, it's also probably the only country in the world where the capital is disputed, and most people assume that in the peace process will be divided up as well.
That's true, but you've got to remember that all of Israel's organs of government are in West Jerusalem, which has been Israeli territory since 1950, and has in fact, since 1948, and has in fact been Israel's capital since 1950, before there was any dispute about East Jerusalem. So it's perfectly sensible to recognize an Israeli capital without prejudice to a future Palestinian state, future Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem. There's no reason to say you can't have an Israeli capital in West Jerusalem pending a two-state peace process.
In terms of Australia actually making this decision, though, would that really change the peace process?
Look, nothing Australia does is going to have a dramatic effect, but I think it would be an important step forward for the peace process because we've got a terrible deadlock at the moment, and the reason is that the Palestinian side is refusing to talk. They've refused to talk completely since 2014 and haven't really talked seriously since 2008. They're under the impression that time is on their side, that they can go to the international community and get what they want. I think if it's shown that other states are going to start treating Israel more normally, start realizing that Palestinian refusal to talk isn't going to get them anywhere, they're more likely to go back to the table. And I think correcting the anomaly with Jerusalem is part of that program, which the Trump administration, I think, is leading.
So what you're saying is then you believe moving this would be Australia sending a message that they believe Israel is much more genuinely engaged in the peace process than the Palestinian side?
I think there would be sending a message that that we can't continue if the Palestinians refuse to negotiate. That if that continues, we cannot hold everything with our relations with Israel in the meantime, and that Palestinian demands that Israel be treated differently and then refusing to talk in the meantime won't get them anywhere, that they need to go back to the table. There was a long time there was an argument that the embassies should not be moved, even though Israel's capital is in Jerusalem since 1950, because it would damage the peace process. You can't say that now. I think the opposite would be the case, because the Palestinians are insisting that they're going to get everything they want without talking, and I think you need to show that Palestinians are not going to get things without talking. But
you are saying then by inference that by Australia doing this, we would be saying we don't believe Palestine is genuinely negotiating, we believe Israel is, here's a move we're going to do to signify that.
Well, yes, I think you should indicate that the Palestinians not negotiating. I think that's a fact. They're not negotiating at the moment. They're refusing to even meet the Trump administration envoys to talk about a peace proposal. So they're not. But the fact of the matter is, whether you think Israel has been doing everything wonderfully or not, Jerusalem is Israel's capital. It's silly to say, we're not going to recognize Israel's capital. It's the only country in the world. We're not going to recognize its capital, and especially when the Palestinians are refusing to even negotiate. And I think that the process of saying, as the Trump administration is trying to put pressure on them to come back to the table, I think they've moved their embassy. A lot of other countries are at least recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. I think that process helps put pressure on the Palestinians to go back to the table at least. The Israelis say that they will negotiate any time without preconditions. The Palestinians are very clear they won't.
Right. What about then on the flip side? Would you be happy enough if other countries wanting to recognise Palestine were putting buildings, embassies, whatever you like, in East Jerusalem?
There's a difference. If you want to say there's a difference in terms of reality. The Palestinian state does not currently exist. I hope it will exist in the future as a result of a two-state peace process. Jerusalem is Israel's capital, and it has been since 1950. It has nothing to do with the refusal to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. It has nothing to do with Israel's occupation of East Jerusalem. It has to do with a strange clause in the 1948 partition plan, which said Jerusalem was supposed to be an international city. That never happened. It's a dead letter now. Saying we shouldn't recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital because of that is silly. Saying we shouldn't recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital now because it will damage the peace process is also silly. If there is no peace process that you're going to damage at the moment.
Right. Maybe, though, as an alternative approach, that sort of, if you like, concession might make people on the Palestinian side realise there's something tangible there. I mean, nothing else is working. Why not?
I'm not sure what you mean. What is there?
Allowing, as I said there, buildings to go on in the east of Jerusalem that want to recognise the Palestinian side, other countries perhaps.
Look, I think recognizing a Palestinian state which doesn't exist yet is a silly idea because it doesn't exist. It's a matter of reality. I think the idea that you could say we recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and we expect in the future that East Jerusalem will be Palestinian capital and we'll recognize that when and if a Palestinian state comes about as part of a two-state peace deal, that's a very good idea, or a perfectly sound idea. I think, but the idea that recognizing a Palestinian state which does not exist does not help matters, especially since the Palestinians are refusing to talk. They're saying, we're not talking, we're going to get what we want through international community, giving it to us at the UN, etc. They're not, and helping them do that prevents negotiations. And negotiations are the only way this is going to be solved.
We'll see what the government's decision is. It is imminent, as we just saw the cabinet meeting wrapping up there. But Tzvi Fleischer, thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Tom.